Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Veil background information. Today we're doing another one of our angels and demons, and we're actually going to be covering the Watchers for a little while. So today's subject is Semyaza. Now how this works, as if you've listened to my stuff before, I give you a little quote first from one of the stories where they're mentioned, or if they feature in it. Then I'll give you the background information, like the sources I used for them, particularly the sources that I felt worked for my character, and then I'll give you a character profile for how they appear in my interpretation in the universe. Okay, let's get started. Fyodoric, my dear boy, whenever I think of your situation, I can't help but think of Semyaza. Do you know the story of the Watchers? Semyaza being the angel who fell for the sake of lust. You might see something of yourself in it. Taliesin Vilmore in The Blackened Viper. So, we're going to discuss the Grigori, or Watchers, beings mentioned in Enoch but alluded to in Genesis as the angels that paired with daughters of Eve and shared forbidden knowledge. I've already mentioned Sariel and Kokobiel, who are named amongst them, but this month we're going to talk about their leader, Semyaza, or Semyaza. I really don't know which one is the better pronunciation, so you'll hear me switch about as I talk. Now, I have to admit, I've been pondering over current ideas of what I want to do with Semyaza within the Veil, but I'll keep it till I actually finish Cruel Temptations, though they are a very interesting being to consider, and so I'll tell you what I've got on them. Firstly, the name Semyaza has also been named as Azza, Uzza, and Shemhazai, but the name is suggested to mean either he sees the name or I have seen, and has several variant spellings. Personally, I keep putting an E in the sand part instead of an A, which is one of these variant spellings. They are first named and mentioned within the passages of Enoch, but also within the Book of Giants, which refers to them as the father of two giants that battled Leviathan. Known by Uzza, they were one of the major deities of the pagan Arabic culture before the rise of Islam, where Al-Uzza are considered a daughter of God, which is one of the few mentions of an associated name to Semyaza as being feminine. Generally, you'll notice as I write about Semyaza, I will drop into male pronouns, as one of the main factors of the Watchers is their lust for carnal pleasures and producing the Nephilim from mortal women. I say this under the pretext they would have male genitalia, but who knows, maybe they reproduce through poking. We're just basically told by Enoch that everything they did for the desire to experience sex, which assumedly angels were not supposed to. Anyway, in the Book of Enoch, Semyaza gathers around him 200 like-minded angels, including Azazel, Kokobiel, and Sariel, to name a few, and though initially titled the Sons of God, or Watchers, they descended to Mount Hermon to make their oath. Like any secret society that's doing things they should not, Semyaza and the Watchers assume to make dark alliances in order to achieve what they seek, which I'm assuming would be making connections with the demons or already fallen angels. But because of the severity of their betrayal, Semyaza does not trust everyone is as willing to be involved in the situation, and so he forces them to make an oath on the pain of death that they will wholeheartedly rebel, and Semyaza is declared their leader. They then agree to use their heaven-gained knowledge to create a false religion that would aid their desires, so the basics of any cult there. He then led them around to breed with human women and produce their brutish giant spawn, the Nephilim, and dominate the earth. Enoch notes that there is great impiety and much fornication, as the poor humans are under the belief of these angels that grow more and more debauched. Then, in the Book of Giants, Semyaza has two named Nephilim offspring called Oya and Hahia. Don't know how I am with the pronunciation there, so I apologise. Who go and fight and defeat the demonic Leviathan purely for the fact they can, but in that book they are summarily destroyed along with their father by punishing angels. But curiously, it is not until Azazel is sharing all his knowledge on magic, seductive ornamentation, presumed to be jewellery and makeup, as well as of war, that in Enoch the Almighty finally reacted and sent Gabriel to incite a civil war between the Nephilim. When the angels come, they are ordered to gather the Watchers and bind them, Michael in particular being told to bind Semyaza. They were then forced to witness their sons making war and slaying each other, and they are then to be remained bound for 70 generations before their judgment and their sentencing to hell with the upper fallen. It's a harsh sentencing, and because of the corruption, God creates the flood of Noah to remove all the influence the Watchers ever had upon the land. In other traditions and stories where Semyaza is linked to Azza, he is tempted by a maiden called Ishtaha to reveal God's name, and their roles are a little debatable throughout text, but I tend to count Azza as their own separate being and do not link them to Semyaza. As for my thoughts on this story, it intrigues me that instead of being punished the moment they coupled, it was not until their forbidden knowledge was fully shared that God reacted in Enoch's story. Then they are punished by being forced to see their sons and loved ones killing each other, which would hint that they had a good relationship with their offspring, perhaps. I'm intrigued overall by these characters, as there seems to be a very confused reason as to why they are punished in the end, because there was seemingly enough generations to pass for them to have total domination. But anyway, here's my interpretation of Semyaza in my stories. Name: Semyaza. Position: leader of the Grigori or Watchers. Story featured in to be announced. Role: to be announced. Gender: agender, gender fluid. I use he mostly here for them. Description: tall, lean, with great glowing white wings and a radiant countenance, as well as a commanding voice. They have strange black eyes that don't often suit other angels, and a sweet smile that lures others in. Their skin is often revealed to be grey, especially after they are fallen, as all colour fades from their body, and they turn bald. Before being punished, they had hair that was the shade of the moon. Realm: Perk Joy Abilities: originally they were one of the many angels created to watch and to study the manner of humans upon the earth, and Semyaza held knowledge of evolution and how it would affect a species, something they later used to try and persuade humans that the god they initially worshipped did not seem so powerful. They have the normal angel powers of being able to listen, remember everything, and understand the Almighty's love, but they also had a great ability of foresight that they lost the moment they touched a woman. Master themselves. Personality: thoughtful and wise, Semyaza was a classically calm angel, who, unlike those put under his command, did not feel the need to have gender. They merely enjoyed watching the happiness of the world unfold until one particular human female drew their attention, and instead of just watching, they began to secretly influence her life. Semyaza is aware of consequences, and yet the lust forming within them is unquenchable, as is their desire for control, and they soon fall. Relations: Michael, an angel he fought beside and respected. Semyaza was almost pleased that the one to come and take him down personally was the one alike to God, almost as if he was recognized as equal-powered. Azazel, his closest friend, he always spoke his mind to Azazel, but was always influenced by him, even if he did not realize it. Later Azazel would be the one to really rule over the debauchery, as Semyaza slowly became violent. Arakil, Semyaza's brother of the clouds. They always spoke regularly and were very close with Semyaza, trusting them as their second above Azazel. Arakil, who was also corrupted by lust and the glory of his Nephilim offspring, yet never held himself as the new god Semyaza made himself out to be. Sariel, the anxious one of the group who never committed lust. Semyaza thought him curiously weak, but then perhaps wiser than the rest, and relied on him to help the Peri and the Dijin keep an alliance with them until the flood. Cockabill, surprisingly the one who could always help encourage him, Semyaza marvelled at the stars and envied his abilities, and was easily swayed by him to encourage an oath. Daniel, the most sullen of them all. Semyaza was fearful that Daniel might be the one to betray them all, until they learnt of their vicious lust and encouraged them to indulge even with demons if they wished. Arakil, the lightning thrower. When this angel showed signs of lust, Semyaza was quick to pull him onto their side, when they knew, as Barakil was the most powerful of all the ones he pulled onto his side. He used Barakil the most to perform his wishes and destroy enemies, giving Barakil a heightened sense of importance. Chazakil, I'm probably pronouncing that one wrong. The angel to teach the use of the clouds. Semyaza and them always held conversation and friendship, and it was thanks to them that Semyaza's methods were hidden, and he later became aware that they were using the methods to hide their own fornications. River, the human female he decided to seduce and seemingly fell in love with, if only because they were more an experiment of his influence upon them. Oh yeah, his eldest son and most violent, Semyaza was proud of him and named him a king in his own right and beckoned him to do what he wished. However, Semyaza was horrified when Oya's violent streak finally overcame the love for his brother, and he showed jealousy in his brother's height, and they killed each other. Heya, his second son of the twin Nephilim. This son was the largest and strongest, but not the wisest, and yet Semyaza was proud of him too, and named him a king in his own right and to do as he wanted. But Heya was eventually turned against Oya, and his family deciding that being strongest, he should be the greater king. There are many more watchers, but I won't list them all. Okay, history. To keep this really simple, really simple. Semyaza was born amongst the many other angels and taken amongst the angels that were to watch over mankind and protect the secret of the universe. When Lucifer rebelled, Semyaza stood alongside the other angels in fighting against them, unlike the watchers they would later control. As he watched the humans, he began to feel drawn to wondering how they might react if they saw him, or if he manipulated the circumstances in their favour. In thinking like this, he identified the birth of a human female that would be named River, and decided to start sneakily influencing her, sending her messages and encouraging her to call him her god. As he watched more and more, he grew more drawn to wanting to touch her, to experience the things humans did with one another, and he was not the only one. Amongst the other angels sent under his control were those that had taken gender in the war, but then refused to fight and instead repent. Many of these angels were undergoing tests, but amongst 200 around him, Semyaza became aware not only of those that were lusting for the mortals, but that were frustrated that the humans could not figure out some basic truths of the universe. His desire for River overcame him, and Semyaza spoke his desires to Azazel and Arakil, his closest brothers of the cloud. Arakil felt exactly the same as he held knowledge of the earth, and wanted humans to stop being foolish. Azazel had held many secrets, but he too was desperate to feel human flesh, and so they encouraged him to talk to the others and pull them together under his instruction. The 200 gathered, and he informed them all their desire was not only to be amongst men, but to teach them many things they should know. At first lust did not come up until he mentioned it would be permitted, and encouraged, for they would forsake heaven and become earthbound. Everyone was still cautious, and Semyaza was soon fearing he would be the only one punished, until Kokibel, under Azazel's instruction, beckoned him to make them swear oaths. They did, and soon they went amongst men, and Semyaza had River. He presented himself and his host of 10 to her village, and placed himself as their god. He met with Azazel and the others, growing this idea, and then finding that but for the oath sworn, some of the younger watchers, like Sariel, were not as eager to be involved in this situation. But the more villagers began to view them as gods, as they shared their knowledge, the more power-hungry Semyaza became. When his 2 sons were born and killed their mother, Semyaza was overcome with grief and fury. Humans were weak, and yet his sons were stronger, and a species more deserving of earth. It was through this he thought of sending his sons to destroy and rampage, and building up the Nephilim to ruin the earth. Only when they seemed to be doing so was Michael sent to bind the figure, and he was forced to watch his sons eventually be killed by one another. And unlike the other members of the Watchers, Semyaza was left tied and hanging in purgatory for the rest of the Earth's existence. Final comments. I have ideas for them and their own story, but right now I'm going to wait till I get on with Cruel Temptations before I do anything else. I really can't have too many ideas running around the place. Anyway, thank you for listening. Bye.